all the colors you see here is natural color. That's why, because they use natural colors, it stayed. It didn't fade away.
Phenomenal colors. Phenomenal.
What you see in front of you here is probably one of the finest 16th century Safavid carpet in the world. The inscription that you see around it is a Persian poetry, which relates to the design of the carpet. It talks about flowers, it talks about birds, it talks about the beauty of nature.
Would it be true to say that this is an evocation of paradise in the Quranic sense? That, I mean, people have said almost all carpets have as an ambition this need to convey some of the sensations of paradise, the pleasures of paradise, the mood of paradise.
Yes, you could say that. You could say that.
I'm in Uzbekistan, deep in Central Asia, dodging the trucks. It's hairy, but I like it, because I know what lies at the end of the journey. An amusing tale is told about the arrival of the Arabs in Samarkand. I find it amusing anyway. There were 3 Arab missionaries who stopped here and decided to let Allah decide their fate by cutting up and boiling a large sheep. The first missionary reaches into the pot and he pulls out the sheep's heart, and he knows that he must return to Mecca, the heart of Islam. The second missionary, he reaches in and pulls out the sheep's head, and he knows he has to stay here in Samarkand. The third missionary, he reaches in and he pulls out the sheep's arse, and he knows that he must leave immediately for Baghdad, which he does. But me, I'm staying here, Samarkand. Now there's a name to conjure with. The mirror of the world, they called it, the pearl of the East, the jewel of Islam. But then they also call it the city of famous shadows, and that's because it's haunted by so many ghosts. Samarkand's an oasis on the edge of the Kizil Kum desert. The trouble with being an oasis is that everybody wants your water, and they all know where you are. This programme's too short for me to list all the conquerors and warriors and nomadic cutthroats who'd loomed out of the desert to take Samarkand. Alexander the Great, Attila the Hun, Genghis Khan, they've all had it. Scythians, Sogdians, White Huns, Black Huns, Arabs, Ghaznavids, Mongols, Bolsheviks. This was everyone's favourite oasis, but only Tamerlane held on to Samarkand for long enough to transform it. Tamerlane was a Mongol who'd been Turkicized and converted to Islam. He claimed some sort of descent from Genghis Khan, but you'd expect that. Around here, all the ruthless warrior conquerors claimed descent from the great Khan. His real name was Timur, common name, which means iron. And Tamerlane is an English corruption of Timur the Lame. He had a disfigured leg from an old archery wound. Tamerlane was a genius at his trade, the ruthless and conscience-free conquest of anywhere he could reach. He personally conquered an empire that stretched from Moscow to Delhi, from modern Turkey to the outer edges of Russia. But when it came to choosing a capital, Tamerlane picked somewhere just around the corner from where he was born, Samarkand, this fabulous crossroads on the Silk Route which Timur the Lame transformed into this architectural gem in the desert.
Timur the Lame is one of the few mortals who's given his name to a style of architecture. And this Timurid architecture is one of the glories of Islam. The city of domes is another of Samarkand's names. They glitter here on every horizon and give Samarkand a permanent shimmer, as if the mirage can never settle.
Domes have always had an obvious relationship with the heavens. People used to think of the sky itself as a giant dome covering the earth, and Timurid architecture makes this connection entirely explicit. The buildings, the lower halves, are fashioned out of these desert bricks, so brown and earthy like the ground around here, and then rising above them are these celestial domes, usually coloured an evocative turquoise.
The Timurids specialised in this blue. Their architecture is excellently colour-coded for instant legibility. The domes are blue, the buildings are brown, the message on the walls could hardly be bigger or clearer or more insistent. Out here in the desert, on the edges of the empire, in the middle of nowhere, you need to spell it out.
The word minarets is derived from the Arabic word minara, which means lighthouse. Originally, these Timurid minarets were intended to be literally lighthouses in the desert. You have to imagine them rising like steeples in this hot and flat land, visible from all angles. And thirsty camel traders trudging along the Silk Route, seeing one of these in the distance and knowing that here they would find water and hope and God. Allah, 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 it says on this one. Muhammad, Muhammad, Muhammad. It's a brilliant piece of religious advertising, perfectly positioned in the desert to bring in the client. So the dusty Silk Road trader is lured to this gorgeous oasis by the lighthouses. The domes tempt him closer, and he finds himself in here, a perfect garden, in which 1,000,000 flowers seem to be blossoming at once. So colourful, so intense. A paradise in the desert, created artificially with the slow flicker of Timurid tile work. Can you hear the water tinkling? Can you feel the shade beckoning? Who wouldn't choose a religion that promises this? I was looking forward to coming here. Shah-e-Zindar, reputed to be Samarkand's most moving architectural site. It's a Timurid necropolis, a street of the dead in which Tamerlane buried his female relations. They say the earliest examples of Timurid architecture are found in here, or at least they used to be, because look what they're doing to them. This is a UNESCO site, an official world treasure. But in Uzbekistan today, not nearly enough respect is shown for the great Islamic art of the past. As far as I can see, Shah-e-Zindar is being vandalized. This isn't restoration, it's ruination. They're determined to complete this by Uzbekistan's Independence Day, which is coming up. This is their idea of working quickly to finish the job. It's like a construction site at a very ugly shopping centre. Look at this brickwork. Oh! Look what they've done to the tiles. There are men up there hacking away at irreplaceable 15th century Timurid domes with 4-inch chisels and 10-pound mallets, and occasionally leaving precious fragments of original tile work behind. If you like buildings and you like Timurid architecture, which everyone in their right minds should, because it's one of the most inventive and unmistakable architectural traditions in our civilization, then don't come here. You'll just want to cry.
To prayer, Istanbul is being summoned. First 1 voice, then 3, then 100. So there's no getting away from it. And in the first few centuries of Islam, the call was made from wherever was handy, an open window, a parapet, a balcony. So the minaret is a relatively late addition to Islamic architecture. And today, the loudspeaker has done away with any real need for it. But the minaret remains such a key ingredient of the mosque's identity that you can't really see anyone phasing them out. Istanbul minarets are extra thin, super pointy, like sharpened pencils. But it's not really this quiver of pointy minarets that defines the Islamic contribution to this relentlessly exciting city. The shape that best captures the spirit of Istanbul is, of course, the dome. Nothing in architecture is quite as awe-inspiring as an impossibly lofty dome. Defying gravity, floating miraculously. And Istanbul is packed with them. The greatest ensemble of extra-large domes in existence, every one of them trying to be the biggest. In the centre of Istanbul, at the heart of the city, there is this great standoff between 2 macho domes, glaring across at each other like a pair of heavyweight boxers at a weigh-in. The sense of confrontation here is so obvious, it's almost amusing. In the red corner, we have Hagia Sophia, a Christian church originally, built in the 6th century. And with its height, its ambition, the conquest here of physics, this is, without a shadow of doubt, one of the 4 or 5 most significant buildings ever erected. To have achieved this in the 6th century defies belief. But then, in the other corner, you have the Blue Mosque, built 1,000 years later by the Ottoman Sultan Ahmed I, but determined, you sense, to outdome Hagia Sophia, to match the ancient Christians, and indeed, to beat them.
Ah yes, the Ottomans. You were wondering when we'd get to them, weren't you? Even the most chronic sufferer from dynasty fatigue will always stir at the sound of the Ottomans. These conquerors of Istanbul were such showy showmen.
When I was 18 or so, studying art history, I came here on an official student trip. And in front of this thing, the famous Topkapi dagger, I suffered an attack of Stendhal syndrome. It's a proper illness, an actual physical reaction, diagnosed by doctors. You feel dizzy, disorientated. Some people actually faint and fall over, literally knocked out by the power of art.
In my experience, Islamic art encourages this heavyweight dizziness more fiercely than any other artistic tradition. And the strong room of the Topkapi Palace, where the treasures of the Ottomans are kept, is a dangerous place for the Stendhal sufferer. This is the Tugra, the official signature of the grandest of the Ottoman sultans, Suleiman the Magnificent. There's a world within a world in there, a cosmos within a cosmos, a garden within a garden. Not bad, eh, for a king's autograph.
They say Istanbul is built on 7 hills, but that wasn't enough for the Ottomans, so they added these other ones. It took 100 years for an architectural hero to emerge in Istanbul capable of taking on the early Christians at dome building and beating them. His name was Mimar Sinan. They say he was born in 1493 in Christian Armenia, taken forcibly as a slave, converted to Islam, which he then embraced so keenly. Allah repaid Sinan's faith in him by letting him live to be 100. He worked for 3 Ottoman sultans and was staggeringly productive. He built at least 100 mosques in Istanbul, and around 30 of them are still standing. This is the mightiest of Sinan's Istanbul mosques. Started in 1550 on the excited orders of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Suleimani Mosque was finished in just 7 years. It's more of a landscape feature than a building, a man-made cluster of mini mountains, rising, rising, rising to that Everest in the middle. It isn't just the size of this mosque that fills you with awe, it's the mood too. It makes you feel all floaty, as if your heart's been pumped up with helium. It's a narcotic experience. You're high on the art of the Ottomans. Their domes are very different from European domes. St. Paul's in London or St. Peter's in Rome go like that. They're melon-shaped. But these Ottoman domes are much flatter. They're like the top of a flying saucer. They make the whole space enclose you and seem somehow circular, as if the entire building is one gigantic dome. To pay for its upkeep, the Great Mosque was given the income of 217 of Suleiman's villages and a couple of his islands. And Suleiman also had Sinan build a selection of funding enterprises around the corner, including a Turkish bath, in which Suleiman had his own cubicle, and so did Sinan. The Ottomans built 150 or so Turkish baths, so many they created a city-wide water shortage. Cleanliness was a fetish so potent in Ottoman Istanbul that it had a special school of poetry devoted to it. I'm afraid my Turkish isn't up to translating it for you. Instead, a few words from Philip Larkin seem appropriate. If I were called in to construct a religion, I should make use of water. Going to church would entail affording to dry different clothes. My liturgy would employ images of sousing, a furious, devout drench. And I should raise in the east a glass of water where any angled light would congregate endlessly. Left or right? I can never be sure. I think it's this way to the right. Very easy to get lost in these streets. I'm looking for the Rustam Pasha Mosque, built in honour of Suleiman the Magnificent's longest-lasting Grand Vizier, Rustam Pasha. And Sinan, who designed it, had to fit it in to this awkward and cramped city space. And these shops underneath, they were built specially to provide income for the mosque, which was balanced on top of them. And they still pay taxes to sustain it. It's up on a platform above the city. And as you can see, the outside of it is plastered with an amazing sequence of Islamic tiles. But that is only a taster of what lies within, because the Rustam Pasha Mosque probably features the finest collection of Islamic tiles in the world. What a sight. Sinan went slightly mad in here. It's an experiment with tiles that he never repeated anywhere else. They're everywhere. Mihrab tiles, back tiles, galleries tiles, dome tiles. Wall-to-wall Islamic tiling, and every single piece in here, every square inch of this, is the finest quality Islamic. It's a limited range of colours for classic Islamic. Lots of blue, of course, which everyone loves. But you know the colour that I like most? The colour that's everywhere in here. It's that. Sort of tomato-coloured, brown, red. It's called Anatolian Bowl. And nobody to this day knows exactly where they found it or how they did this with it. If you run your finger over it, it's lumpy. When you put it in the kiln, it rose, and it gives it an extra sparkle. To this very day, they haven't been able to reproduce that exact colour. They've tried. Everyone's tried. But the Anatolian bowl of the Izniks is beyond them. You'll recognise this shape here. It's a cliché of Iznik tile work. The Turkish tulip. They were actually discovered not far from here, in the hills above Anatolia. And from Turkey, the tulip arrived in Europe, where it caused mayhem, became so popular. But the Turks themselves reclaimed their own tulip rather belatedly. It didn't appear in Islamic tile work until well into the Ottoman period. But once it had appeared there, it made up for it, certainly, because it began appearing everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
There's a chance, a very vague chance, that you don't know what Islamic tiles are. So I've mounted an arduous expedition from Istanbul to find out.
Hello, it's nice of you to see us. I came to find out more about Islamic tiles, how they're made. You are one of the few craftsmen who still use the old techniques.
Yes.
Your workshop is here, is it, at the back? We have a look.
This colors is important in Islamic because the metal oxides.
Metal oxides.
Yes. Copper.
Copper
Yes,
oxide.
copper.
Green, huh?
Green, and the other copper is turquoise.
Turquoise is
Yes.
copper. So the Islamic tiles, when they use when they use turquoise, it's from copper oxide.
Copper, yes.
So what about this Anatolian bowl, the red color, the difficult color?
Red is important. I use the Islamic clay.
Islamic clay. This
Yes.
is the famous Islamic color.
Yes.
Peter, you dig clay yourself here? Do you go?
Yes.
You find
Yes,
the place.
I found. Yes.
So you have a secret
Yes.
secret
Yes,
place.
secret.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, secret.
People say that it's very, very, very difficult now to
Yes.
get the same color.
Yes.
Why? Same clay.
Because the lost.
Oh, they lose.
50% lost the color. Yes.
So when you actually put it in the kiln
Yes.
to
Yes.
bake it, 50% of it gets lost.
Yes.
I see. So it's not very efficient, so they don't use it now.
Yes.
But you use it.
Yes, I
Excellent.
use it.
It's a beautiful color. Look, maybe we can show people there. Look. Look at that. Tomato red.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Some think Islam's an inflexible religion, fixed, unsmiling, doctrinaire. And in some places, these days, it is. But the story told by its art, the true story of Islam, is one of extreme nimbleness and constant change. When it crossed the Sahara and plunged into the deserts of West Africa, when it got to here, Mali, look how superbly it adapted to local conditions.
All the larger mosques around here are exactly a day's journey apart. They're like mystic petrol stations, spaced carefully along the trade routes. This is the biggest of them, the Great Mosque of Jenne. It looks ancient, doesn't it? Venerable. But actually, it was built in 1907. This is a 20th century building. Jenne is the oldest known city in the whole of the sub-Sahara. It's even older than Timbuktu, its sister city further up the Niger. Jenne, they tell us, was settled in the 3rd century BC, but Islam only reached here in the 14th century, brought by the Arab traders who'd crossed the Sahara and decided, quite understandably, not to return. Legend has it that the first king of Jenne who converted to Islam knocked down his palace to build a mosque instead. Not this actual building, an earlier one on the same site, which survived here for 500 years before crumbling back into desert dust. This particular version of it was built when the French were here, and it's the largest mud structure in the world. In all the old books about it, you'll read that the French were responsible for its planning and its construction. But that's a typical piece of colonial rewriting. It's simply not true. The latest research agrees that from the baked and holy ground it stands on to those dinky tips of its minarets, this is an entirely African construction. If French engineers had measured out this courtyard, they'd surely not have come up with the creative parallelogram followed by this ground plan. This is not a shape that exists in European geometry. Fantastical, looming, unlikely, no European imagination could ever have come up with this. Its outlines, its colours, its sheer inventiveness are so obviously from around here. The Great Mosque of Jenne is a giant tribute to an unmistakably local look. It's made entirely from mud bricks. This entrance to the courtyard is said to look like a giant mask. You go in through the mouth and see those minarets with the ostrich eggs spiked into the top. They're said to symbolise purity and fertility. And they also protect the tips of the towers at their most vulnerable point against the enemy which all these mosques of Mali most fear: rain. Thus, the Great Mosque of Jenne combines the needs of Islam with more ancient and endemic needs of the local population. The inside is cool and dark in the preferred Jenne manner. Star-shaped holes in the roof create a charming internal sky.
Every village in the area has a mini mosque featuring fabulous variations on the Jenne style. They're all different, of course, but they share a common enemy: water. Every time the rains come, once a year, huge slabs of exciting mosque are washed away. But instead of complaining about it or bemoaning their lot, the people around here see it as an annual opportunity to come together, celebrate and renew. Every spring, Jenne throws a replastering party when everyone gets together to make new mud and splatter it about. And in this village too, everyone joins in annually for this splendid replastering of their mosque. It's a giant mud beano and looks fun, but it also signals an interestingly different architectural attitude, a trust, a glorious trust in incompletion. None of the mosques around here is ever considered truly finished. All of them are ongoing projects, living buildings. And because every year they're replastered from scratch, every year is seen as a new beginning, a fresh start. And that is an excellent architectural approach.
I love the mud beauty of Mali. It's such a pared-down form of Islam and shows so clearly how adept Islam was at adapting to different terrains as it poured across the world, gathering up huge armfuls of new international converts. so I love the mud mosques. But I wouldn't call them representative. Not in the way this is representative. We've seen so much money, haven't we, on our journey around the Islamic world. The Ottomans of Turkey, the Timurids of Samarkand. These were some of the richest rulers the world has had. But even the unimaginable wealth of the Ottomans or the Timurids would have seemed like small change to the most lavish of all the Islamic super dynasties, the Mughals of India.
The Mughals ruled India for 3 centuries. After the first of them, a minor Timurid princeling called Babur, managed to conquer Delhi in 1526 and found himself in possession of an enormous heap of riches.
Babur has left behind a coruscating diary in which he records his first impressions of India.
It's spectacularly rude.
The people are not handsome, he complained. They have no skill in architecture. No good horses, no good meat, no grapes or muskmelons, no good food or bread, no baths or colleges, no candles, no torches, not a candlestick. Yes, but they did have diamonds as big as chicken eggs. Gold, emeralds, rubies. And that was enough to persuade the Mughals to put up with the heat and the dust and the lack of muskmelons and to make India theirs. And the Mughal dissatisfaction with what they found here became an unexpectedly productive force. In the absence of an actual earthly paradise, they set about constructing one for themselves out of art and architecture.
The Taj Mahal is always said to be a monument to love. The tale is endlessly repeated of how Babur's heartbroken descendant, Shah Jahan, built the Taj as a tomb for his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal, who died giving birth to their 14th child.
You know that famous photo of Princess Diana sitting up here on her own with no Charles beside her, looking so lonely? What made it particularly poignant is this famous story that's told of Shah Jahan's momentous royal love for Mumtaz Mahal. When you come here to Agra and witness this sort of splendour, the Mughals displaying their inordinate wealth, there's a tendency to see it as nothing more meaningful than the scattering of rupees. Very tasteful, but still loads of money sort of behaviour. But underpinning the Mughals' spending lust was a set of specific Islamic ambitions that aren't commented upon enough or noticed enough.
Professor Khalili, you very kindly brought out a few of your possessions. This is only a tiny smattering of what you have in your collection.
Can I just make a small correction before I go further? You called these objects on the table my possession. Nothing belongs to anybody. At the end of the day, everything is created by Almighty and it belongs to Him.
Well, I would very much like to be the temporary custodian of this.
There is a beautiful story about this box. It's made out of 93 floorless emeralds.
Yeah, the Indian emeralds.
Indian emeralds.
Indian emeralds, yes.
Indian emeralds. So that's extremely, extremely rare and probably belonged to Shah Jahan. It's of his period. So they didn't make this sort of thing just for anybody. So it's probably a royal piece.
So the creator of the Taj Mahal
Yes.
cared about everything that he created. He must have been one of the greatest patrons there's ever been anywhere.
No, there were a few. I mean, he was definitely one of the greatest patrons in India.
This would have been used as a little jewel box, would it? Or?
Probably a box to put jewelry or stones or emeralds, but it was definitely a part of the court belonging.
The Quran is many things, an instruction book, a history, a guide to life, but it's also an architectural manual. Anyone who reads it properly, which architectural historians seem bafflingly unwilling to do, must be struck by the similarities between the descriptions of paradise given in the Quran and the gorgeous worlds constructed for themselves by the Mughals.
Surah 55 details the pleasures of paradise.
There will be 2 gardens, dark green in colour from plentiful watering. In them will be springs pouring forth water in continuous abundance, and fruits and dates and pomegranates. They will recline on carpets whose inner linings will be of rich brocade, like rubies and coral. Then which of the favours of your Lord will ye deny?
The gorgeous world of the Mughals isn't just a display of spending. It's never godless or merely greedy. Fountain for fountain, palace for palace, garden for garden, all of it is an attempt to imagine the Islamic paradise and an effort to fulfill the Islamic obligation to build that paradise on earth. You must have noticed that you never see ugliness in Islamic art, or neurosis, or personal problems, or any of that dark stuff that so obsesses Western artists. Islamic art always tries to look as beautiful as it can. Why? Because it recognizes that the problems of the artist are just storms in a teacup, utterly irrelevant in the wider scheme of things. In the end, all that matters is the beauty of God, and the artist's task is always to reflect that beauty. To do otherwise, to fret about yourself, to go all dark and miserable in your art, is to waste your artistic time.
آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. صدق الله العظيم. آمين. Beste kijkers, beste luisteraars. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Vrede zij met u allen, mogen de genade van de Almachtige en zijn zegeningen op ons allen rusten. We weten allemaal dat in de maand mei, op de tweede zondag, Moederdag wordt herdacht. En in juni op de derde zondag hebben we dan Vaderdag. Hoewel dat geen islamitische gedenkdagen zijn, zijn het toch wel belangrijke momenten om ons te attenderen op de rol die de ouders en de ouderen in ons leven vervullen ofwel hebben vervuld. En om aandacht te vestigen op het feit dat het onze plicht is om altijd goed voor hen te zijn. Misschien ook interessant om te weten waar deze dagen vandaan komen. Moederdag, de geschiedenis, is begonnen in Amerika, waar een zekere Anne Jarvis in 1914 met Moederdag is begonnen. Zij bewonderde haar eigen moeder en de rol die moeders over het algemeen vervullen in de maatschappij. En we weten allemaal wat voor een rol dat is. Het is vaak zo dat moeders, sommigen hebben nog een betaalde baan. En daarnaast moeten ze ook nog de zorg voor de kinderen op zich nemen. zorg voor het huishouden, zorg voor de echtgenoot, soms zorg voor nog meerdere familieleden en uiteraard is de vader er ook die daar ondersteuning aan geeft. Maar in het algemeen is het toch wel de moeder die wat meer op dit gebied bezig is. En deze Anne Jervis die zag dat en die wilde dus een speciale gedenkdag voor de moeders instellen. Toen haar eigen moeder overleed in 1905, op de eerste zondag in mei, toen heeft ze een jaar daarna op de tweede zondag in mei het initiatief genomen om een gedenkdag voor de moeders te organiseren. En zo is dus Moederdag ontstaan. En het heeft tot 1914 nog geduurd voor het haar lukte om daarvan een nationale gedenkdag te maken. En zo hadden we ook, zoals Moederdag ontstaan is, ook Vaderdag ontstaan in Amerika. En dat was toen een zekere mevrouw Sonora Dot uit Washington haar vader wilde eren. En haar inspiratie daarvoor was geweest. En het Jervis die kort daarvoor dus Moederdag heeft kunnen instellen als nationale gedenkdag. Zo vond dus de eerste Vaderdag plaats op 19 juni 1910 in Washington. Maar het werd pas in het jaar 1972 officieel. Dat was dus een beetje een achtergrond van de herkomst van Moederdag en Vaderdag. Zoals we allemaal weten wordt ook in religieuze geschriften het belang van de ouders heel sterk benadrukt. Niet alleen in de Koran, in nagenoeg alle religieuze geschriften wordt het belang van goede zorg voor de ouders benadrukt. We lezen bijvoorbeeld in de Bijbel, Efeziërs hoofdstuk 6, versen 1 tot en met 4. Gij kinderen, wees uw ouderen gehoorzaam in de Heer, want dat is recht. Eert uw vader en moeder, zodat het goed met u gaat en u lang leeft op de aarde. En vaders, verwekt uw kinderen niet tot toorn, tot boosheid, maar voed hen op in de lering en de vermaning van de Heer. Einde citaat. Deze versen, behalve dat ze dus bevelen aan de kinderen om goed te zijn voor de ouders, geeft het ook een opdracht aan de ouders om een goed voorbeeld voor de kinderen te zijn, om de kinderen goed op te voeden. En wat betreft opvoeding van kinderen moeten we weten dat de kinderen niet alleen maar datgene doen wat we hun vertellen, maar voornamelijk datgene wat ze bij ons zien. Het voorbeeld dat wij hun geven, dat is datgene wat ze navolgen. U kunt misschien aan de kinderen zeggen, je moet niet zoveel klagen, je klaagt te veel. En zelf bent u de hele dag op Facebook aan het klagen over de prijzen, over de regering, over van alles en nog wat. U zegt wel aan uw kinderen dat ze niet moeten klagen, maar zelf geeft u een ander voorbeeld. Misschien zegt u aan uw kinderen, je moet niet te veel roddelen, over anderen praten, kletsen. Maar zelf pakt u wel dagelijks de telefoon om te bellen met uw vrienden of vriendinnen. En dan flink roddelen over anderen. Uw kinderen zien dat en al heeft u ze gezegd dat ze dat niet mogen doen. Het voorbeeld dat u geeft, dat zal hen ook wel bijblijven en misschien inspireren om dat ook te doen. Dus daar moeten we ons ervan bewust zijn en dit vers zegt het ook, dat we een goed voorbeeld voor onze kinderen zijn en niet alleen in onze woorden, ook in ons gedrag, in ons handel en wandel een goed voorbeeld voor hen zijn. We lezen verder in Hindoe geschriften, Manav Dharma Shastra. Hoofdstuk 2 is dat, versen 2:27 tot 2:28. De ongemakken die de vader en de moeder doorstaan bij het voortbrengen van menselijke wezens, kunnen zelfs in 100 jaar niet worden afgelost. En men dient steeds datgene te doen wat hun behaagt, wat de ouders behaagt dus. Einde citaat. Het citaat zegt ons dat onze ouders zoveel voor ons betekenen, voor ons doen, voor ons gedaan hebben, dat we dat eigenlijk nooit in ons leven gaan kunnen aflossen. En dat we daarom zoveel mogelijk hun tevreden moeten stellen. Natuurlijk zijn onze ouders niet perfect, ook wij zijn niet perfect, niemand is perfect. Het kan misschien dat de ouders naar u toe iets hebben gedaan wat minder prettig is, wat u als minder prettig heeft ervaren. Maar dat betekent niet dat wij ook op die manier met onze ouders omgaan. We zien vaak citaten staan op Facebook van ik ben alleen maar goed tegen degene die voor mij goed is. En degene die niet naar mij omkijken, ik kijk ook niet naar hun om. maar het is een hogere graad van geestelijke ontwikkeling als we dat allemaal achterwege kunnen laten. En ook goed zijn voor degenen die misschien niet goed voor ons zijn of zijn geweest. Dat lezen we bijvoorbeeld in Koran, hoofdstuk 42, vers 37 en ook in andere versen. Dus in het bijzonder naar onze ouders toe, al zijn ze misschien niet perfect geweest als opvoeders, laten wij in elk geval proberen om zo goed mogelijk, zo perfect mogelijk te zijn als hun kinderen naar hun toe. We lezen verder in de Koran, hoofdstuk 17, vers 23 en 24. Uw Heer heeft bevolen dat u niemand dient behalve hem en dat jullie goed doen aan de ouders. Als een van hen of beiden bij jullie een hoge leeftijd bereiken, zeg dan geen woorden als foei tegen hun en berisp hun niet en spreek vriendelijke woorden tegen hen. En bescherm hen uit genade onder de vleugel van nederigheid en zeg, mooie dua, en zeg, mijn Heer, heb genade met hen, omdat zij mij groot brachten toen ik klein was. Einde citaat. En de Koran geeft in hoofdstuk 29 vers 8 wel enige nuancering, namelijk, als de ouders de kinderen iets opdragen wat tegen de Koran ingaat, zoals eerder gezegd, ze zijn niet perfect. In dat geval gaat natuurlijk de Koran voor en dat gaat dan boven het bevel dat de ouders geven. We lezen verder in hoofdstuk 14 vers 41 een mooie dua waarmee ik deze khutbah gestart was. Rabbana ighfirli wa li walidayya wa lil mu'minina yawma yaqumul hisab. Hetgeen betekent, onze Heer, verleen bescherming aan mij en mijn ouders en aan de gelovigen op de dag dat de afrekening zal geschieden. Einde citaat. Verder ook nog een mooi vers, hoofdstuk 71 vers 28, een mooie dua. Mijn Heer, vergeef mij en mijn ouders en degene die met geloof mijn huis binnentreedt en de gelovige mannen en de gelovige vrouwen. Einde citaat. Ook de profeet Mohammed, vrede zij met hem, heeft in zijn leven heel veel nadruk gelegd op goed zijn voor de ouders, voor de vader en de moeder. Zo is er een gezegde wat als volgt gaat. Een man kwam naar de profeet van God, vrede zij met hem, en vroeg, wie heeft het grootste recht dat ik voor hem of haar goed gezelschap ben? De profeet antwoordde, uw moeder. En wie daarna, vroeg de man. Weer zei de profeet, uw moeder. Weer stelde de man dezelfde vraag en weer zei de profeet voor de derde keer, uw moeder. En voor de vierde keer, daarna uw vader. Een ander gezegde gaat als volgt. Asma, dat is dochter van Abu Bakr, vertelde, mijn moeder kwam mij bezoeken terwijl ze een heiden was. Ze was dus geen moslim. En ze verwachtte liefde van mij. Ik vroeg aan de profeet, zal ik haar wens vervullen? En de profeet zei, behandel haar zoals zij dat van jou verwacht. Dus niet alleen als onze ouders tot de islam behoren, of perfecte moslims zijn, bij wijze van spreken, dat we alleen dan goed voor hen zijn. Ook al zijn ze niet eens moslims, alleen maar het feit dat ze onze ouders zijn, geeft hun al het recht dat wij als kinderen goed voor hen zijn. Tot slot ter overdenking, niet alleen op moederdag of vaderdag dienen we goed te zijn voor de ouders, voor de ouderen, maar laten deze dagen een inspiratie voor ons zijn om ook alle andere dagen van het jaar goed voor hen te zijn. Waar ze hulp nodig hebben, waar ze ondersteuning nodig hebben, laten wij proberen hun dat te geven, niet alleen aan onze eigen ouders, maar ook aan andere ouderen binnen onze omgeving, waar we enige invloed kunnen uitoefenen om het voor hun beter te maken, om het leven beter voor hun te maken. Laten we dat proberen. Het is een hele zegenrijke daad. Behalve dat we daarvoor zegeningen van de Almachtige ontvangen, zullen we zelf ook heel veel voldoening daardoor ervaren. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'anil azim.